Estás escuchando Conversaciones de Altura.
Hola amigos, welcome to Conversaciones de Altura. This is episode 95. I'm Joel. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Means a lot. Tonight's intro is going to be a short one because I'm super excited about our next guest, Danny Walker. He's one of my favorite drummers, one of my favorite gringos. I mean, I love this guy. I love the way he plays drums. I've been lucky enough to call him my friend. I met him almost 11 years ago. We toured together. I've seen him live multiple times. I get to hang out with him every time he comes to Mexico City. So I'm super excited about our conversation. So that's it, and that's that. And please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please push the bell to get our notifications. I'm trying to get more episodes in English because I need to improve my English. I noticed that my English is getting really rusty. So I want to just improve, and I'm going to try to release more episodes in English. And we're also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter as Conversaciones de Altura. Yes, I know it's in Spanish and it's kind of long, but you will figure it out. You're smart. Let's jump right into the interview. It was really fun, and I'll see you next time. Love you guys. Hello, Danny. Thank you so much for doing the show, man. I appreciate it. It's very good to see your face. It's been a long time. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing good. It's good to see your face too.
I want to start because with this question, how did the connection with Mexico start? Because I mean, most of people don't know, but you have strong ties to my country. I mean, a lot of people love you. I mean, including myself. We love you here. We love you hanging around, having you hanging around, and of course, playing shows with your 1,000 projects you have. But when did it start, man?
With Mexico, I think the first time I ever played in Mexico was, I want to say 2002. I was drumming for a goth rock band called Cinema Strange. And we had played a couple headlining shows out there. And then I had been there with Phobia shortly thereafter. Came over with Exhumed for a festival. And just kind of established a lot of relationships with people out there. I mean, Mexico is always a wild time and a fun time, and the shows are always awesome.
But let's start with, how did you get into, and I mean, I know that you've been a drummer since you were like 10 years old, but how did you get into like skateboarding and then punk rock? What came first, skateboarding or the punk rock music?
Punk rock came a little later. I think drumming came first. Skateboarding came around the same time. I don't know what inspired me. I just was always attracted to this sort of like street rebellious sport, you know. I grew up in a city called Camarillo, which is very small. It's part of Ventura County here in California. And there wasn't a lot to do. And there were just a lot of skateboarders around here that would skate at the shopping centers, and they would, have their favorite spots, staircases that they could fly off of and curbs that they could grind and rail slide down. And when I was a kid, my father built me a quarter pipe ramp. So yeah, not the full half pipe, but just the one ramp. So we used to pull it down to the edge of the driveway, and all the neighborhood kids would come over and skate. So, a lot of these kids I didn't know in the beginning, but they just, oh, this guy's got a ramp. Like, let's go to Danny's house. And we'd set up the boombox and play like hard rock and glam rock at the time, and listening to like Guns N' Roses and Metallica.
Motley Crue, yeah.
Motley Crue, yeah. So yeah, and I just kind of fell into that scene of skateboarding. I always thought that maybe one day I would become a professional skateboarder.
Right. No, go ahead, sorry.
Oh yeah, I felt at the time I was fairly good, but at a certain point it was like, okay, music or skateboarding. I chose music.
Right.
Plus I didn't want to risk breaking a bone or hurting myself,
Right. I've been talking to some friends about the same thing, like some friends in Mexico that they both do music and skateboarding. And their answer, because I'm like you, like, okay, what if you break your leg? You won't be able to play drums. Or what if you break your wrist? You won't be able to
Yeah,
play guitar.
yeah,
And my
yeah. It's
friends
the
are
risk.
like,
Yeah,
too risky. But they're like, life is a risk, carnal. That's their answer. And I'm like, is that like a skateboarder thing? Like, are you attracted as a skateboarder to danger? You don't care if you break your bones?
well, it's kind of like what I would call an adrenaline junkie.
Oh, okay.
People that have surf and skate and skydive and do these wild things. I would never do that. They live for that rush. So
But
maybe that's
but did what did you get from skateboarding? If it wasn't like the adrenaline thing, what did you get? Just the fun?
yeah. I feel like skating and drumming, I got the same rush out of that. Or just, if you're pissed off about something or, you're sad, you can just sit down and do that thing and focus. And it's a way to, I don't know, air out.
Because of the skateboarding, that's how you got into like punk rock, because it's like, okay, let's go to a show and let's see what's scene is about.
Yeah.
Because they go hand to hand, right?
Yeah. Well, I felt like, especially at the time, coming out of the 80s and the early 90s, I mean, a lot of skaters were listening to hard rock and punk. And there were, and some hip hop too. But that was another cool thing is, I found out about a lot of bands just based off the skateboarding soundtracks and videos. At the credits, you see, who was in the video. And, well, I got to check that out and buy that record. So that really opened the doors for me to find out about some pretty incredible bands.
Right.
Or just, you go to a record store and you just look for anything that's on the same record label. It's safe to assume that it's good. Sometimes it's not, but that's the chance you would take back in the day. You would buy a record and maybe you wouldn't be able to return it. You couldn't sample it online.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you get into like the tape trading thing? Would you trade tapes with your friends from your older bands, maybe, or like, okay,
No, I never had a connection with people overseas until I started actually touring myself. So for me, I would make a lot of mixtapes for my friends and girlfriends. You'd meet someone and you'd want to expose them to some cool bands, and I would literally handwrite everything. What album it's from, the song title and quotes. Maybe even draw my own artwork on it, and just make these little compilations.
Right. I mean, I would do the same. That's the best. I mean, I think sharing music with your friends and girlfriends and everything, it's a good way to connect with people, like, and have you had that feeling when you share a song with a friend and they're like, oh, I don't like it, and you feel bad?
Yeah, I've been there. In fact, when I was, I was in elementary school still, 6th grade. And I remember having to hide the fact that I listened to some of this death metal music that, they would probably abandon me if, they heard what I was listening to. It was really strange. So I had a select few friends that I could listen to that stuff with, and other people I couldn't. I just knew. So I just kind of pretended that I wasn't into it.
Right.
Like Cannibal Corpse, Deicide, Obituary, all that early Roadrunner and Earache stuff. It was just not something that I could really share with many people because nobody was listening to that. And today you could probably ask anyone in the world what death metal is, and they probably know now. I mean, there's a cartoon based off of it now, Metalocalypse, and it's just it's more accepted these days. But at the time, it was like, oh, this guy's a Satan worshiper.
Oh my God, of course, man. It's funny, but I didn't get that from my parents, even though my mom is very religious. She would just be like, oh my God, what is this shit? But she never really gave me, like, she would never stop me from listening to that to that type of music. She would freak out. I remember the A-side, D-side. Remember, I think they had this album, it's white, and I think it's Jesus Christ covered in a blanket, in a white blanket.
Yeah, that album's called Once Upon the Cross. And you know, they had different versions of the cover, but the one that they ended up selecting, he's covered up. But then if you've ever looked in the inlay, you open up the booklet and it's him dissected and his organs are in a pan next to him. It's something that wouldn't have gone over well if it had been on the front cover, you know?
Yeah, and at the same time, Brujería Matando Güeros also was released about the same time, but that was actually forbidden, if I'm not mistaken. Remember that cover? Matando Güeros.
I have that album. And I remember seeing, they had a music video that Headbangers Ball would play out here in the US. It was like MTV. It was, you know, an hour of metal.
Yeah.
They had a video, or I think it was La Migra was the song.
La Migra, te pica el culo.
Yes.
Wow, that's awesome, buddy.
So for me, yeah, you know, not having the internet back then, it was like Headbangers Ball, and it was going to grocery stores where they sold heavy metal magazines. You know, they had Rip, Hit Parader, Metal Edge, Metal Maniacs, all these magazines, and I'd go there with my mom and help her shop. And I would just be like, oh, can I get this? And she'd buy me a magazine. She didn't care. I mean, I grew up in a rock and roll family, so they were never like dissecting what I was listening to and reading the lyrics and telling me I can't do this or that. They're just like, well, you know, maybe it's a stage, a phase. You know, we listened to our music that our parents hated when we were kids. So it's, you know.
No, for sure, man. And it's always, I mean, you must know as a musician, as a professional musician, how important it is the support of your parents, you know, because that gives you a boost, and it takes off like this pressure of, oh, my parents don't want me to be a professional musician. And that happens a lot, right? Unfortunately, but it's really interesting to have the support of your parents, right? Especially as a little kid.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like if I didn't have that kind of support, I still would have rebelled. And I know so many people that had to go through that. It was like a real struggle to be able to listen to what they wanted to listen to and have to hide it from your family. Thankfully, I didn't have to, but I would have been that rebel, you know?
Right.
Like if I had grown up in a heavily religious family or something, you know?
Right. So I let me ask you this, because I've been thinking about this a lot. When you started listening to punk rock, what was it about that was appealing to you? Was it the philosophy of the punk rock movement, or was it only like the music? Because for me, when I started listening to punk rock, hardcore, metal, it was always about the music. It wasn't really about the philosophy, you know, like that came later. Right. It was about like the tupa, tupa, tupa. And
right. Yeah, it was just, you know, the aggression and the intensity behind the music. And it was just angry, and it just, and I wasn't necessarily an angry kid growing up. I grew up in a great household with a great family and had a great life, but I just, something about it just, you know, I felt I could connect to it. And the philosophy aspect was a big part of it too, just kind of delving into politics a little bit, you know? Yeah.
Right. And
then, you know, it wasn't the same old shit. Cause you know, it's funny. I grew up with classic rock, and I grew up listening to glam rock, and that went into heavy metal and death metal. And I didn't get into punk rock until after that. You know, when you're a child or you're in your youth, you're kind of striving for some sort of identity. You know, I only listen to this, and this is what I'm about, blah, blah, blah. Well, when I got into punk, suddenly I thought death metal and heavy metal was lame. It was cheesy. So I sold all my metal records, and I got into like, you know, Misfits and Black Flag and Minor Threat. And, you know, I'm like, this is what I'm into now. This, you know, this is my identity. And I got into, you know, old school punk, whether it be from the States or the UK, listening to bands like Discharge and The Exploited, GBH, Crass, you know, you name it. And then I guess I don't know. I just felt I was on a new path, and I hated everything that other stuff stood for. But then I started getting into more hardcore punk, which led me into grindcore. And then I'm thinking, this is all very similar to death metal. I see where all these bands have influenced each other in some way. You know, a band like Slayer, you know, grew up on Suicidal Tendencies and DRI and stuff like that. Dead Kennedys.
Right.
And then obviously grindcore, you know, bands like Napalm Death adopted the political aspect, you know, bands like Crass, you know,
Right.
like heavy left, socio-political stuff. So at a certain age, I'm just like, you know what? I'm kind of into everything. You know, I don't know why I'm being such a snob. And I regretted selling all those records that I had.
And I've always had this question: why did you decide to go through like the like the hardcore, well, grindcore metal route instead of maybe going through like the jazz route? You know what I mean? Because you have the how would you say, chops to do both.
Yeah, the chops to be able to do both. Really what opened the door for me with like jazz and funk, soul and hip hop and other things outside of what I was really into was taking drum lessons. I studied with this guy, Al Velasquez, and you know, if you want to do this, you got to do that. And, you know, he put me through some, you know, rigorous curriculums, and I studied different styles of music. And, you know, even if I thought the music was lame, there was always something I could grab drum wise out of that. And like, well, you know, what if we take that and apply that here in a metal song, or do that? Which is what a lot of these progressive metal dudes have done over the years, you know. You know,
right.
Rudiments and chops.
Right. But you never really thought about like, okay, maybe this jazz thing, because jazz, I think it gives you more options, right? More options as in
A lot of improvising.
Freedom. Yeah, freedom.
Yeah, exactly.
And as a drummer or as a musician in general, I think, especially when you're a trained musician, I think that's what in some way you're looking for, to be more free in music, right?
Right.
So I guess my question is, did that attract you at some point? Like maybe I should go that way because I feel more free, or did you? I guess you found your freedom in prog metal.
I mean, like I said, I've always been a metal guy and a hardcore guy, death metal guy. But alongside of that, taking lessons and listening to jazz records and listening to people like Elvin Jones and Tony Williams and all these guys that shredded in a completely different way. That was like really influential and interesting to me, and brutal in its own way. And then I just, I think that the gateway for me was, you know, the band Death, like the progressive era when they had Sean Reiner and Gene Hoglan, you know, when Human came out and you have Individual Thought Patterns. These guys were doing something completely different than the other death metal bands. You know, there was screaming, but there was like a lot of melody in the guitar riffs, and there was like all this tinkering and accenting stuff. And you know, I stole a lot of my ideas, and you know, from guys like Sean Reiner and Gene Hoglan. You know, that was.
Right. Yeah. And you got to tour with them, right? With Sean, didn't you take for him? Also?
Yeah, that was it was with the Cynic, Intronaut, and Dysrhythmia. I think that was like 2011. I think that was right after the Helmet tour the previous year.
Right.
That could have been the same year. It's all blurry now, but yeah. And rest in peace, Sean. You know, he's a great guy. We got to tour together. You know, one of my biggest influences. And we even got to do a drum clinic together through a Sick Drummer magazine.
Wow.
We did this huge drum clinic up north, and I mean, I was asking myself, why am I even in the same room with these guys? You know, it was surreal.
to go back to Uphill Battle. That was like the first band you started touring with, right? Like the first,
Yeah, that was
professional band.
Yeah, that was the first band to ever get signed to a record label or go on an actual tour. I played in a bunch of local bands before that and with Uphill Battle, and it was just regional shows. It was just playing in different areas in California. That was about it. I think before we got signed or went on an official tour, I think we played some shows in Arizona, and we were really excited about. They're like, oh, we're playing shows in a different state. How cool! But that was really the beginning. I was like, shit, I'm doing something. This is getting signed to one of my favorite labels at the time, Relapse, who had a roster of so many amazing bands at the time and still does,
Right.
They never fail. They pick up some of the best bands in the world.
Okay, I want to talk about how you form Intronaut, because actually I don't know the story. I mean, I know that you and Sasha started it, but I don't know how you met Joe and David. Well, it was Leon first, right?
Well, Leon was in the band for a little bit before Dave. But basically, this goes back to the days of Uphill Battle. Around that time, we'd play a lot of shows in LA, and Sasha was in a band called Anubis Rising. And we played with them more often than not, and we just became friends and always talked about starting a new project, doing something. Uphill Battle was, we were doing our thing, but we were also kind of coming to an end, and I wanted something fresh, and I think he was looking for something, and he started sending me, demo tracks. He'd program a drum machine and write some riffs, and that was like the beginning of writing the EP Null. I don't know if you're familiar with Null. That's the first thing we put out, which originally was a demo, and then we got signed by a Canadian label, Goodfellow, and that was kind of the beginning of that. But when we were forming a band, it's like I had a guy and Sasha had a guy. Sasha went to high school with Joe.
Oh, cool.
I know this guy. He's a good friend of mine, phenomenal bass player, which we all know he is. And I had Leon, who I had toured with together when we were in Exhumed, and I was a fan of the stuff he had done in the past, Impaled. And while Leon is very much a death metal guy, he loved a lot of the progressive stuff. So, he happily joined and played with us. He did Null, Void, and the Challenger EP was the last thing that Leon did. And then we picked up with Dave on Prehistoricisms, who was a good friend of Joe's.
Let me ask you this, because at some point in your career, you play with Jesu, with, I forgot his name, sorry, the guy from Godflesh.
Justin Broderick.
Justin Broderick, yes.
Yeah.
How did that, I mean, it's a two-part question. How did that get to fruition, and how did you prepare yourself for that? Because if I'm not mistaken, it was kind of like a thing of, are you ready to do it? Kind of thing, maybe?
Yeah, it was very last minute, and I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. I was at a concert at the El Rey Theater in Los Angeles to see what the hell? I think it was Neurosis, Red Sparrows, and Grails. And Matt Jacobson from Relapse Records was there, and he got me backstage, and we were kind of rapping, and the Hydra Head guys were there, and some of them knew me to, for who I played with in the past, and knew I was with this new band Intronaut. And Mark Thompson hit me up and said, hey, are you interested in doing this session gig? Jesu has this tour booked with Torch and Isis, and their drummer can't do it. Ted Parsons, who's phenomenal. He played with Prong, Swans, Killing Joke, Godflesh, and Jesu. He couldn't do it, so they just needed someone quick, and just absolutely, so I got in contact with Mark the next day. He put me in contact with Justin. They sent me the set list. In fact, I was even in contact with Ted Parsons, who was like, hey man, thanks for picking up this gig. If you have any questions on anything, ask away. And
wow.
So I just studied the material, But also there were some complications because Jesu had problems getting their work visas into the country. So Intronaut ended up getting on that bill, filling in until Jesu made it over. And we were under the impression that we'd maybe play 1 or 2 shows. You know, it started off in San Diego, but we ended up going as far as from San Diego to, was it DC? Yeah, I think DC was the last show that Intronaut did. So we did the majority of that tour. It took Jesu that long to get over. And I had never met these guys in person. We never rehearsed in person. And our first show was at the Irving Plaza in New York City on that tour, sold out show.
No shit.
I'm nervous as hell because I'm like playing with someone that I completely admire and grew up listening to. And while that music is really simplistic, still it was like a lot of weight on my shoulders. But anyways, that's how that happened, and we carried out the rest of that tour. And man, what an experience! Yeah,
No, for sure, man. So it was like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you started playing just like that. No rehearsing, no
rehearsal. I mean, we talked a little bit backstage, and then we got on, and they drew the curtains, and there's a sold out crowd, and just like, well, here we go.
Wow.
No turning back here.
Were there any notes regarding, I mean, I haven't seen Jesu live. I would love to see Jesu live, but I haven't had the chance.
Oh, it's like a religious experience, man. It's loud.
Oh, I bet, man. I bet.
It's loud.
Did they give you any notes on maybe doing like the electronics? Because I know they do some electronics live, right?
They do, but that's all run out of Justin Broderick's laptop. See, I'm playing to a click in my ears.
Okay.
Oh, mind you, that was the first time that I ever played to a metronome live.
No shit.
Yeah. So, you know, you're playing these extremely slow tempos, and I'm wanting to fight them because, like, you know, you got adrenaline when you're playing live, and, you know, you got to stay in the pocket. But there's all this backtracking of extra layers of guitar and like synth and samples. So yeah, that was different for me, but that's where the electronics are coming from.
Wow, no shit. So was it hard to adjust to playing to a beat, to a click?
A little bit. I mean, I had like rehearsed and recorded with click, but never live. But that whole mindset is different, you know, so you really see where you kind of want to rush, you know. Yeah, it was interesting.
No, for sure, man. I think, I mean, I was gonna ask you about drumming and all this stuff later, but I think this is a good way to talk about it. I guess there's like a difference between playing to a beat, to a click, than live, right? With Intronaut, have you done it after you tasted it with Jesu? Was it like, okay, I think we can do this with Intronaut?
Yeah, I think, well, we had been recording to a click since the beginning, since null. We always did. There wasn't anything that was raw as far as I can remember, but we always performed raw. We didn't use backtracking or play to a click. It wasn't until we toured with Meshuggah and Animals as Leaders in 2013, which we were trying to step up our game, and we knew, you know, both these bands are like machines. And I think we had watched some YouTube videos in the past, you know, that people would take with their cell phones or video cameras and watch them. And the tempos were so high, you know, like I said, just because of, I mean, typically people play faster live. So we wanted to lock it down to the studio tempo and just be more in the pocket. So that was the first tour we did that. And we never looked back, you know, we always played to a click.
Did you get pressure playing in a challenging band, and I mean challenging as difficult as Intronaut, of playing always hard things? Are you pressure about that? Like, okay, it's Danny from Intronaut. He has to, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the rest of these guys knew that I came from a background of technical music, but teaming up with these guys and just the challenges, shit, man. I mean, they made me a better musician. There were so many things that were challenging in the beginning and took forever to learn and get down. And being in that band completely expanded my vocabulary as a drummer, and especially having Dave in there, being a drummer as well, and kind of coming up with drum ideas himself, and us collaborating and talking about it and learning some of his stuff and bouncing ideas off of each other. Like, it was really fortunate to kind of have that system, and I think everyone in the band could agree that, we all made each other better players. And that's what I love. Like, none of this music came with ease in the beginning. It never did. Like, it was always like, what the fuck is this? And how are we going to do this? This is insane. And you work at it and you work at it and you get it. But that's the thing. You don't want it to come with ease. You want to, like, break through it and conquer it, and you're evolving as musicians and a band, and it's always been that way with Intronaut.
I always wonder, like, how do you prepare as a drummer to learn those complicated passages for a tour? I mean, you play 1 hour, sometimes 1 hour set every night. Like, how do you prepare yourself for a tour like that? Do you have notes with you? Yeah, I wonder how you do it, because it's
just a lot of preparation and just rehearsing. That's it. And even after we've prepped for a tour, if I have my doubts about myself, I'll just when we're in the van or while we're traveling, I'll listen to it and just internalize it. And sometimes when you obsess about that, it can kind of work against you and kind of psych you out. But yeah, I mean, that's really just soaking yourself in the music, physically playing it, but also just listening to it constantly. That's what I found works for me.
Wow. So, yeah. I'm fascinating, man, because I've seen you live like more than 20 times. So I'm like always like, okay, how does he do it?
Yeah, I don't know.
He's just practicing, right?
Right. Don't fuck up.
Yeah, exactly. Have you fucked up live with Intronaut?
There's only one time I can remember, and that was on the Meshuggah tour, and we played. It was in Philly. I don't know what was going on, but I just lost my part in the song Milk Leg. And I was like literally shitting my pants. I'm like, we're going to train wreck. This is it. Like, this is going to be that one moment where the whole band stops. We never did. We just like got right on track. I don't know how we did it in such a complicated section of that song, but we did. And it was, so I can't even remember the last time that something happened like that. Maybe when I was a teenager, and some of these fresh new bands, but yeah, I mean, that's the only thing I can recall, because that was such a huge and important tour in front of such a large crowd. And here I am admitting that, but all was good.
No, man. I mean, we're humans, so
right.
We will fuck. I mean, we will fuck up. It's part of being a human being. So when what do you have on your monitors? Do you have more guitar, more bass, more drums?
Typically the mix that I would take would just be an even amount of guitars, a little bit of bass. The only thing for drums I would have is just kick, because everything is in front of me. I can hear it clear, but I like to hear the clarity of my kick drums. So just kick and never vocals. I just
never, just
no.
like
I trust what they're doing, but I just don't want to hear it. I just need to be locked into the music and all that. It's mushy and there's just too much, you know. You just need a little guitar, a little bass, kick drum, done.
Wow. So not even bass, because you said that it has more guitars than bass. So guitars are like up than bass.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it's definitely necessary to hear Joe.
For sure.
But there were a lot of songs where we would kind of play against each other, you know.
Mm.
You know, kick bass, back and forth, 1 and 2 and 3 and if I hear Joe too loud, I tend to want to lock into him. So I kind of need to I need to ignore him to keep in place with what I'm doing. So I would just keep him a little, you know, deep in the mix. And just get enough, but not like overwhelming where I'm distracted.
Right. Wow. So what about with a band like Cephalic Carnage, when it's like different vibes, different musicians? How do you prepare for that? And for example, do you play with a click?
Click. Not with Cephalic. Okay. There's like so many random tempo changes and where things ramp down and ramp up. No click for that band, no way. But as far as like what I want in my ears, is generally the same. Just an even amount of guitars, no vocals, a little bit of bass, kick drum with all bands. Yeah.
Wow. So you don't. That's how you got used to that. Like just build a little bit of drums and that's it. Sorry, right. A little bit of guitars, drums, and a little bit of bass, and even with the fastest band, right? Like Cephalic Carnage is faster than Intronaut for sure, man. How do you?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you keep with the changes? How do you memorize those changes, man? I still can't believe it, man, because I have listened to both bands.
I don't know. Well, you know, the first time I subbed in playing for Cephalic Carnage was Mexico City back in 2014.
Oh, that was the first time ever?
Yeah, it was the first time. I mean, I've been friends with these guys and I've toured alongside them since like 2003, man. Like Uphill Battle, we toured with Macedon, Cephalic, and Dysrhythmia. And then when I was drumming for Exhumed, we did Europe with Cephalic. So as people, we're like family, you know. I never thought that I'd actually help them and sub in. But you know, their drummer couldn't do that festival, so that was the first time that I stepped in. And I had some cheat sheets and some notes on a floor tom on the left side that I didn't even use. I just used it as a table because some of these parts are so random. I mean, I think, you know, they were telling me that some of their riffs were written after phone numbers from friends. Just random, just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, just, you know, and it's like, how do you remember all that? Especially with, you know, I maybe had like a month to study the material, I think. So just for those particular sections, when I knew it was coming up, I just follow it like a phone number and just, you know.
Wow, that's awesome. That's why I ask these questions, man, because I mean, I know some drummers are like, oh, okay, this is kind of boring, but for me it's fascinating because I haven't played in a band like Intronaut or a band like Cephalic Carnage, but then you're telling me how you integrate the music and how you absorb the music and how you represent the music, how you play it live, but then you are telling me about how the Cephalic Carnage guys write the riffs, you know. So I don't know, for me at least it's fascinating, man.
Yeah, I think so too. Glad you think so. It's yeah. And believe me, yeah, I was so nervous going into this Psycho Las Vegas thing just because, you know, nobody had played a show in a year because of the pandemic, and then I hadn't played anything that big in like 3 years, you know. So it was a little nerve-wracking, and I wanted to be, on my A game and nail it. I had a little more time to go over the material. I've done a tour with them in Europe, 2018. Actually, that was at the time, that was the last tour I did for a long time. So we basically did the same half-hour set we did in Europe and added like maybe 4 or 5 songs to it. So I only had to learn, 4 or 5 new tracks, but their material is not easy.
No. Who are your favorite blast beaters, if that makes any sense?
Oh, the first person that comes to mind is Kai Hato from Rotten Sound, who also plays in Winter Sun and Swallow the Sun and a bunch of bands. He's a session guy, but he was kind of the guy that riled me up and got me excited about grindcore again, because he was just so much tighter than his predecessors, and it just has technique and just throws in all these kind of jazzy accents, much like when we were talking before about Sean Reiner and Gene Hoglan and death metal. He's doing kind of similar stuff with grindcore, and it was just really colorful and different. I'm like, fuck.
Wow.
So he kind of like brought back the excitement in that for me. And of course, early Napalm Death. Yeah, I don't know. He's the one that pops into my head for that.
Yeah, man. You know who does it for me? A lot of drummers. I love the
Flo
blast beats.
Monnier, Cryptopsy, every drummer that ever played in Gorguts, same thing, they've never had a bad drummer.
Yeah. Gargots, yeah, man.
Yeah, I don't know. There's too many.
Yeah, I know, man. You know who blew my mind the first time I saw him live? The drummer from Brutal Truth.
Okay, Rich Hope. Yeah.
Rich, yeah, man. He has an interesting way of playing blast beats, kind of like free jazzy.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's certainly organic, just more punk rock, just balls in. Yeah.
Is it about strength or technique? The blast beats. Like if I want to learn I only want to learn how to play drums just to play blast beats all day. That's the only reason I want to play drums.
Well, I'd like to think it's more about technique, because if you can balance that, you don't tire yourself out. When you're all full force, it's easy to cramp up and peter out, drop down in dynamic. If you kind of keep it to an even dynamic, you can go for longer periods comfortably, without even breaking a sweat. It's technique. I don't know.
It's interesting, because I don't think blast beat started like that with that technique. I think it has evolved, right? To a point
absolutely.
where,
If you look at bands like Repulsion and Napalm Death and what these guys are doing, look at Mick Harris from Napalm Death and just pummeling away. It's more raw and kind of caveman and just more punk rock. It's just fury, just like, how hard can I hit this thing? But it's short-lived when you're hitting that hard. So like I said, it's about that balance of technique and dynamic speed, and just being comfortable.
Wow. Yeah, man. It's fascinating, man. I love it that it has come down to a science of, okay, if you want to play blast beats for a long time, for a long period of time, you can do this. You can sit down this way, grab the drumstick like this, hit it like that. And I always thought that blast beating was like only just like, okay, just hit it, like you said, hit it hard and go fast as you can. But then I started hanging out with a mutual friend in Mexico, Leo Padua. Shout out to him. And every time I go see him live, he's always like focusing on technique. And that's when I'm like, Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's not just like machine gun.
All right. Well, that's when you're going to have more longevity, and the dynamics will be smooth. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like just dropping in volume constantly. It's just more consistent.
Well, yeah, for sure, man. So now let me ask you this. You have reached a level of drum playing that it's on top of the top. How do you challenge yourself, and what's the goal, if there's any goal of, okay, now I'm to this point of I have this level of technique. What do I want to do? Where do you go from this level of like the top of the top drummers? How do you evolve, or you know what I'm trying to ask you?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I think this is kind of the difference between practicing and jamming. I think I'm guilty of just jamming. I kind of just play a lot of things that I'm comfortable with. I don't think lately I've challenged myself a lot with new stuff. I'll pull up videos and I'll, watch drummers on YouTube and Instagram. I mean, no-name guys, young guys that are like doing phenomenal stuff, and, might grab an idea here and there from them. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. Not really, to be honest. Maybe I should be practicing more. Like real practice, Yeah, I just kind of like work with what I have in my backpack as far as like drumming skills and technique, and I just kind of jam out and we'll improvise and come up with ideas on the spot and record them, and be like, that's cool, and don't forget that. It's about it.
Right. Is there any, or are there any specific genres that you would like to explore that you haven't explored deep before?
Maybe more in Latin music, because I think I'm fascinated with like the independence and between the feet and the hands is like pretty incredible with what some of these drummers do.
Right.
Yeah, this independent limb coordination and super crazy polyrhythmic stuff that, can easily be used in metal music or whatever you want to do with it. And I used to train with a guy, Al Velasquez, who is great with that stuff. And I've even considered recently teaming up with again, just to kind of focus on that,
Right. So you're,
like I said, I haven't been challenging myself lately. So I think it would be, I think it certainly couldn't be bad.
what's next for you, buddy? I mean, we have talked about Intronaut, and the last album that you recorded is Direction of Last Things, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, that, ever since the departure with them in 2016, I think we did a European tour, and then we did that Gore Guts and Brain Tentacles tour. That was kind of it. We took a year off. And then there was the departure in 2018. Ever since then, I just kind of started teaming up with musicians that hit me up to do projects, and some old friends. There's been a lot that's happened since then.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, if you want to talk about the departure of Intronaut, please be you're more than welcome to do so, brother. Because I think it's important for people to know, and people might be wondering like what happened there, right?
Right, absolutely. Well, when let's see, after we did some heavy touring, Direction of Last Things, the band was kind of burnt out. We took some time off. Sasha was in the middle of a growing business, his guitar company. And I think with everyone being burnt out and some of us being guilty of kind of like flaking out on band practices, me and some others, I think he just kind of got burnt out on that and kind of over it, and basically threatened to quit the band. And we convinced him to stick around and just take a year off. So that's what we did. 2017, we pretty much didn't do anything. I focused on some other stuff, and I was living my life in Long Beach. And 2018, we started to touch on new ideas and work on songs. Sasha and I were, trading demos back and forth for what would be their last album. And I had some relationship troubles, and some allegations had surfaced of domestic abuse, which were false. It was completely vindictive. I was never convicted, charged, arrested, or of anything approximating domestic abuse, nor do I have a history of that, being a violent person. So it's just, it's a really hard time. And when that surfaced, there was kind of like this social media uproar, and people popped up out of the woodworks that might have had some irrelevant grudges from the past and wanted to, I don't know. It's like people just talk shit with no consequence on the internet, pass around false information and slander and spread gossip. And so do some of these metal publications when they catch wind of that. And I think at the time, Intronaut was pressured, and people gave shit to the whole band for my allegations. And I feel they had no choice but to cut ties, because, the band is a business.
Right.
Sasha's got his business. Yeah, I mean, that's really all I can say about that. And, there's a lot of gray area. It's not so black and white. And there's two sides to every story. And, it's just kind of like pick a side kind of thing. There's no proof of anything. Just the result of a toxic relationship gone wrong. That was the result.
Right.
And they chose to make their statement after I made mine, which mine was kind of a knee-jerk statement. And I don't know if that made things better or worse. I think it made things worse at the time. But that's just how things kind of go these days, I mean,
No, for sure, man. And
because the court of public opinion is so easily swayed these days. And you don't necessarily need proof of anything. You just need some sort of outcry, mob mentality, and everyone kind of jumps on it and takes it as fact. And that's not necessarily true. And, I have always backed women's rights. And I understand and I support the Me Too movement. But, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that someone might take advantage of that platform, with malicious intent. Someone who is angry about a situation. I don't want to dwell on it. I mean, there's so much I could talk about, but basically that's that. Me and the guys are on good terms.
okay, cool.
I was never arrested or convicted or charged of any crime. I wish I could make that more clear to people, but I've just been trying to live my life and continue to work on music. Ever since 2018, I just went through a dark period, where I almost gave up on music. I didn't drum for a few months. I thought, what's the point? Like, how do I get past this? Browsing on the internet, reading all this slander, and it's just, it was heavy. I even went to therapy for a while. I bought books. I went through my phases of alcoholism. Like, I didn't know how to deal with it, And the only thing that kind of kept me afloat at the time was just working with some of these new artists and bands and people that were willing to overlook that and believe me on it.
Oh, I bet it was a really hard time. And I want to thank you for opening up and being very honest about the whole situation. I'm sure that your friends and people who follow you as a drummer, as a musician, appreciate that you are telling us your side of the story. And I know it's a very hard subject to talk about, especially when like the public narrative is believe her, which I don't necessarily agree with that 100%, because at the end of the day, there's people out there who lie. It doesn't matter what genre you identify with. There's people who lie. There's bad people out there. So we also have to take that into account. And the thing with that is that when someone falsely accuse someone, almost immediately that person loses everything, you know. And I mean, of course, I am up all for the Me Too movement, for women's rights. I mean, I live in Mexico City. It's one of the most dangerous cities for women. So unfortunately, I'm surrounded by this. So I'm aware of the situation that happens. Having said so, I think it's also important to talk about people who have been wrongly accused, especially if it's a public figure, you know?
Especially being a public figure or whatever you want to call it. I mean, you are you are crucified. You are blacklisted just even with an allegation. And the thing that upset me the most, not just not waiting for an outcome, just reacting. But I mean, while I'm upset at their statement and how they went about it, I understand it too. And I feel like a lot of other people would have done the same thing, because you got to look out for yourself, your own reputation. You know, you can't associate with something like that, whether it's proven or not. It's just the possibility. So it just sucks, it's it really sucks. And my whole thing is like, I feel like nobody should dismiss abuse. But this idea that we somehow automatically, I don't believe all women, I don't believe all men, I don't believe all politicians. I mean, I don't know. I just look for hard facts and wait for an outcome. Have a system, a court system. And that's why we have some of these grassroots movements. But still, like, before the shots are fired and, you're accusing, like, wait it out,
Yeah, man. No, I agree with you. And thanks again for opening up. And I'm really happy to hear that you get along with the guys, because I mean, as a fan, like I said, it was sad to read that you were leaving, but I mean, I'm glad to hear that you're still getting along with the guys. I mean, because I love the guys as well.
Yeah,
And
they're all amazing people, and we're still friends. I mean, we don't hang out. I mean, I haven't even really seen all the guys since then. I mean, I ran into some of them at the NAMM show, before the pandemic, and we text each other. I always wish all members happy birthday, and they hit me up here and there. So I mean, things are cool. It's just one of those unfortunate situations. You kind of got to do it. You have to do. It's a business decision.
right, yeah, I
Not
understand,
that
man.
these aren't moral men and wouldn't condemn behavior like that, obviously. But I mean, again, there's no proof of that. And they didn't know my relationship with this person. They didn't know this girl. They didn't know. And that's the thing too that's weird is, just because you spend time on the road and you're with, a band, your family for so many years, you don't know what happens behind closed doors. You don't know what their private life is like. You know what I mean? So it's understandable that they could be, like, well, I don't know, like, this is unacceptable, not going to deal with it, whatever.
Right. Yeah, man.
So
No, I agree. I mean, it's a complicated subject, and it's yeah, I mean, it's complicated and it's hard to have like to be put on the spot. That's what I'm trying to say. It must be difficult to be put on the spot and have to deal with all the lies and people throwing shit at you when people don't know you, man. They don't know
right,
who you
and
are.
they, and they don't know her either, and and even though I'd love to, I'm not going to throw her under the bus. But I mean, she is someone with a violent history and has had to go to anger management and past relationships, and I kind of blame myself for staying involved in toxic situations, which I kind of had a history of over the years. I'm sure you kind of know. But like, I just, and that's the main thing. And I think with the allegation surfacing, it was just kind of the nail in the coffin for them. It was just kind of like, well, Danny kind of has a dramatic past, and my work ethic was kind of slipping at the time. I wasn't very present. So I don't know. They just cut it and started fresh, and it sucks. And I'm very sad about the situation, but I'm very proud about them. And every drummer who stepped in to help out has done a fantastic job. All the guys.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, I thank you again for opening up. And now let's switch gears and let's talk about the new stuff that you've been working
Okay.
on. So where do you want to start? Because you have like hundreds of projects.
God, I know there's so much in like the past 3 years it's been. I gotta say the biggest thing that occurred, I teamed up with the Long Beach kind of sludgy doom metal band called Ozorn.
Yeah,
They're
really
pretty
good.
popular in that area, and I teamed up with them, and we tracked a record. Well, we worked on a record for a while that was mostly pre-written, but we also wrote together. We headed up to Dave Grohl's studio 606 out in the valley.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I saw you
we
on
tracked.
your
We
Instagram.
tracked an album called Your Killer, and that came out on Scene Red Records. Yeah, I mean, that was the first thing that I had done since that. So there was just, I don't know, a lot of energy and emotion that went into making that record. Like, it was just, I don't know. The vibe I put in and got out of doing that record was like the feeling I get when I listen to a Neurosis record. Like, I don't know, it's just like, ugh. So yeah, I'm very proud of that album. I sent you a link. I didn't know if you got a chance to check it out.
Of course. Yeah, it's heavy, man, but heavy in a different type of heavy.
Right.
Heavy like intense. Like you said, like crowbarish some parts.
It's got some rock vibes to it too. There's like some popish moments. But yeah, they needed a drummer at the time to do that album, so I did that, and teamed up with some other mates of mine. Mike Darren, who lives on the East Coast, he's out in upstate New York. He plays guitar for a band called Circuit of Suns. They're a very technical and progressive death metal band. We got together and we started a project together called Avitas, which is still in the works. I tracked my drums for that record last year, and we had some lineup changes, and that's still being worked on at the moment. And we're hoping that should be complete by the end of this year.
Okay.
And I wanted to share some stuff with you, but it's not complete yet. But definitely digging that.
Is that the one that you recorded with? I think his name is Kevin.
Yeah, I got Kevin from Dillinger Escape Plan at
Yes.
Backroom Studios out in New Jersey. So I tracked drums with him, and then they've been bouncing around to various different studios doing the rest of the stuff. And then eventually I ended up playing drums on Mike's main band, Circuit of Suns. Their drummer, Bryce Butler, is just was busy playing in a million, bands. So they hit me up to do that. And that's another thing that's in the works. I recorded that record months after the Avitas one. And hopefully some point next year that will be complete. But that's some insane death metal. And then there's another band called Avitas.
Avitas, yeah.
Yeah, my buddy Russ Brownfield and I started that project. He's from Oklahoma City.
Oh, cool.
And we kind of same thing how Intronaut started, he just demoed stuff with the drum machine and just started sending me tracks. And then I would, send me a click with a scratch guitar, and I would send my drum ideas back, and we'd bounce back and forth. We did an EP called Machina back in about a year ago, I guess. This is all kind of around the same time. Yeah. And we had some session musicians on there, the singer and bass player of Black Crown Initiate. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah,
band.
yeah, of course.
So those guys subbed in and played, because it's basically just me and Russ. Russ writes everything. And we just finished another EP that's in the process of being mixed. We just released a single from that. I never sent you that, but I will.
Yes, please.
And that's pretty much it. Besides that, I'm trying to, I had to make myself a list in case I forget about things. Oh yeah.
There's like a rocker, Blind John Pope.
There's Blind John Pope from Long Beach. Yeah, that was a band that I started jamming with. I was roommates with one of the members, and they were an acoustic trio, kind of like country bluegrass, but very dark subject matter. Suddenly, they lived with a drummer. So they're like, hey, you want to take this electric and see what we can do with it? And it was really cool. So we have released a couple of records. We just released a second one. Sanford Parker,
Chicago, from Chicago, sounds familiar.
Yeah, he just mixed and mastered that. Yeah.
Didn't he produce our friends, the Atlas Moth, maybe?
Yeah, and like Pelican and stuff like that. Yeah. So he did that, and dude, it's awesome. Yeah, so there's that. I was even working with a buddy of mine, Ben Woods. He's a flamenco guitar player, a metalhead at heart, but I guess at some point in his life, he decided to drop the pick and just play with his fingers. And he started this thing called flamenco, like flamenco metal, and he would do these heavy metal covers, flamenco style.
Wow.
And just shred, acoustically. And he had hit me up about the idea of doing some tracks with him. So I think we did like 5 or 6 songs together. And I put a lot of stuff up on YouTube. The album we did together, God, what is it called? Invaders from Outer Spain.
That's awesome, man.
Oh, it was pretty fun and super technical. Yeah, he had done some work with Sean Reinert from Death. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Yeah.
'Cause Sean used to live in Long Beach as well, as we all did, and they did some of that flow metal stuff together. So I guess it all kind of made sense, kind of in the family. Yeah, besides that, there's some new stuff. There's a death metal band from Florida called Swine Overlord. I'm learning their stuff. There's another band from Seattle called Vimana, and it's actually Zach from Cephalic Carnage, who had been in the band the majority of their career. And Nick, who plays bass in Cephalic, is actually the singer of this band. He just does vocals.
Oh, cool.
So I'm studying their stuff right now, and it's super brutal. It's hardcore death metal. I don't know.
Wow. So how do you get your physical condition up? Because man, all this is like just blast beats.
Just have to play drums at home.
That's it.
Like I said, I haven't rehearsed with a band in a room together in over a year. since the Ozorn stuff, because we were at least playing shows together and rehearsing in Long Beach. Yeah, so this is just the continuation of writing music with people over the internet. And so far it's worked. I mean, like I said, I'd rather be in a room to discuss and make changes more easy, but it is what it is. And I'm just happy to be a part of it and have the opportunity to play new music.
No, for sure. And especially you keep your mind occupied and yourself occupied, but especially your mind, right?
It keeps me out of trouble too. Yeah.
For sure. Well, man, I mean, it's a pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate you taking the time to do the show. Before I let you go, where can people find you? Like your social media, and if they want to work with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on all the typical social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I mean, it's all Danny Walker Drummer. I have my own YouTube channel, same thing. Yeah, that's about it. And I have all the links to all the new projects on my social media. So
for sure. Yeah, we'll share it.
Cool. Appreciate it.
Are you open to work with all types of musicians, right? Like if someone who plays, I don't know, cumbia wants to work with you, can he or she email you like, hey, I want to play cumbia with you?
Absolutely.
That would be really cool, man. You playing some metal cumbia or some stuff like that.
Right.
Do you like that type of stuff, cumbia?
I think it's impressive. Like I said, when I studied with Al Velasquez, I mean, he kind of opened the doors to a lot of Latin, Afro-Cuban music.
Yeah, man.
So that's why when I, yeah.
You know what you should listen to? Psychedelic cumbia.
Is there such a thing?
Oh my God! Of course. After
there's everything.
After we finish recording, I'll send you some links, man.
Okay. Yeah, please do.
Psychedelic cumbia dedicated to the spirits in the Amazons. Not all songs are about the spirits in the Amazons, but some of them are about the spirits in the Amazon.
Okay. I'll check it out.
Okay. Give me a second, brother.
Yeah.
Acabas de escuchar Conversaciones de Altura.